the overall time it may take to go from I have an idea for this solution to getting a thing approved and actually implemented historically has been 9 months to a year across the org. That's incredibly tough for somebody to actually keep up with innovation and the solutions that are getting deployed, let alone stay engaged with that process because of all of the operational hurdles internally to review, collect the information, understand the vendor, select all of that, build versus buy decisions, everything involved there. The aspect that I think is so critical to unpack here is an acute understanding around the point of use, the implications of the decisions, and ultimately, like, we talk a lot about human in the loop, but like, how much is that human still going to put their level of human decision making and really like context on top of whatever the output is?
Hello, and welcome to the Health Data Ethics Podcast. I'm your host, Jenny Owens, and I'm here today with my friend Nick Woo. We're going to have a great conversation about AI governance, about the role of technology, and about how our need for governance has really led us to the need to define what governance is and what it looks like. But before we dive in, Nick, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, hey Jenny, good to see you again. Thanks for having me on the show. So excited to be a guest. My name is Nick Woo, everybody. I work with a company called AlignAI. We're based out of Columbus, Ohio, and we really focus on providing not only a platform, but a partnership just to help navigate getting AI and valuable AI delivered inside of the org. So governance is a key part of that. Safe workflows and collaboration are a key part of that. And just in my work, I get to see what a lot of enterprises are doing in terms of managing this overall operating model for AI. So excited to unpack that with you today, Jenny. And of course, listeners, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out afterwards. Happy to get more.
Yes, I cannot wait. I remember so clearly that we met at Ohio VC Fest. This would have been a few weeks ago. And I think you grabbed me after a talk and you said the magic words, I want to talk with you about AI governance. And then my memory picks up sitting across from you at a table. And I think perhaps 20 uninterrupted minutes had elapsed where I just asked you question after question after question. I'm so excited.
It all started with you because there was like a speaker and they were like, what are your personal professional goals? You stood up in the audience and you said, I want to reinvent AI governance. And I was like, yes, I want to talk to her about that. That's so exciting. And of course, we've had conversations since then, but it's just such a funny serendipitous way to meet. I'm happy we found each other, for sure.
I know. It's really delightful. I told the entire group of investors and other conference attendees that I wanted to reinvent AI governance. And I also wanted to recommit to running. Like I got real personal and like it was fascinating.
Yeah.
Keynote speaker was great.
Yeah, agree. So fast forward now, what's it been? A couple months? We're finally... I'm on your podcast. I'm happy to be here. I know we chatted ahead of time about some topics. Let's get into it for the listeners. See what we can talk about.
First thing I want to do is I want to start with just like a really light, fluffy little question. Can you define AI governance for me? What does it mean to you? What does it mean to AlignAI?
Okay.
And when we're thinking and talking about AI governance, I want us to have very clear in our minds what it is and what it isn't.
Yeah, totally. And it's such a loaded question. I'll give my personal definition and how we think about it. And obviously it varies at every organization, but I think a lot about, as we think about delivering valuable AI in any organization, there's that kind of opposing forces of like throughput, let's get more AI deployed. There's that other side, which is like, let's be thorough. Let's make sure that whatever we are approving for folks inside of our organization or our customers to use that involves AI or any sort of evolving technology, like let's make sure that we've considered what vulnerabilities that may introduce, what sort of risks are involved, how we should consider protecting ourselves and our employees in that space. And I think governance, just as a huge umbrella term, really helps to make sure we're setting up those guardrails and we're like creating a space to leverage this innovative tech that's constantly evolving. And we have a space to review it, but also constantly monitor it and just like make sure that how it's being used and then how its usage kind of evolves over time is monitored and managed so that we aren't accidentally doing things wrong or causing a risk of data leakage or all the things that you read about in the headlines around companies having issues with that.
Yeah, I so desperately do not want either my day job or any of my hobbies to be the one that's in the headlines for a data breach or even for, unethical use of AI. I was just actually giving a talk earlier this week, and I referenced that science paper from 2019. Do you remember the one? They were talking about an algorithm that assigned patients to a coordinated care organization based on their anticipated cost of healthcare over the next 12 months. And it turns out that that's a metric that is really highly racially stratified.
Yeah.
because of the different ways in which different populations have access to and use the healthcare system. And so we really picked that apart in the talk that I was giving. It was really fun
I'll add
and
on to it
sad.
too that I think the
But
burden of like everybody, every associate plays a part in governance. It's not like that's somebody else's job. Same thing with bringing in new technologies and like new ways to work. I think it's something that everybody should have accountability for. That's growing and evolving inside of orgs for AI. But I just want to make that point. It's like it's not like governance lives off in this side closet inside of an organization, but like everybody plays a part because you're the one using it at the end of the day. Any of these AI tools.
I really could not agree with you more. And I think you've said very succinctly something that I've been kind of struggling to sum up. A friend of mine who worked in data governance used to always say that we are all stewards of this
Yeah,
data.
totally.
That everybody who touches, who holds, who interacts with data in any way is in some part responsible for its responsible use. And I think the very similar thing applies when we think about artificial intelligence. It's to borrow the framework from the EU, right? It's the developers, it's the vendors, it's the deployers, and it's the users. These all are roles that have responsibilities. But because I've mentioned the EU AI Act, I want to first go back and say that governance of artificial intelligence in the United States is a little bit different because we don't have a federal privacy framework. We don't have a federal AI governance framework. And our current administration has made it quite clear that they are not into regulating this. We were getting some indications out of the Biden administration that there was going to be like a very similar federal framework, and now it is open field. Talk to me about some of the influences on the governance parameters that are available through AlignAI, and also that you're thinking of yourself. I don't want to make this just about your company. I'm also
Yeah, yeah,
interested
yeah.
in your opinion.
I guess I'll start with Adeline AI. We get to work with companies in the United States, but also in Europe. So it's fascinating across healthcare, financial systems, manufacturers to see kind of the difference, how a lot of these teams and enterprises end up kind of rhyming with each other because they all have a shared goal, right? As we mentioned, like let's not introduce vulnerabilities. Let's set a very measured way to make sure we're collecting and reviewing and monitoring AI solutions as they get deployed. The EU has an EU AI Act, as you mentioned, that has very, very specific parameters, falling out down to the level of like what is the levels of risk, what's meant by it, what's the documentation associated to it, like really that instruction manual at the federal level. That has pros and cons. On the United States side, it's interesting because there is a little bit more freedom for each organization, and a lot of times the practices, especially around how they're thinking about categorization of high, medium, and low risk, kind of come back to the team maturity and comfort with AI, and of course the industry that they operate in, and like how critical the processes that this AI solution would be touching. But a lot of times it varies by organization, which is so fascinating, but all across the EU and the United States have a shared goal of like, let's get to consistent kind of ratings for that. And let's do what we can to introduce some sort of a fast track path for things that should be monitored and of course logged, of course, but don't need to go through the whole life cycle of review, approval, long lead time stuff there.
I mean, the question that frequently gets asked of me during my day job is I went home and on the weekends I made a custom chat GPT that pulls from these like 6 resources. Does this really need the same level of scrutiny as this a machine learning predictive model that's looking at which patients are going to have postoperative complications or need to be discharged to a skilled nursing facility? Like, these are at very different risk levels. Surely we can come up with different levels of scrutiny for each of them.
Yes, and that's, I guess, I think what I've seen a bit of a con of the overarching EU AI Act is that often leads to over processing of the lower risk use cases and solutions. You're absolutely right. Not only does the risk tolerance vary by industry, company, even team maturity within AI, but also the AI solution, what it's actually doing. They're so different and they can vary. They're not all created equal. So it's very hard to fit this wide aperture of AI solutions and use cases into a single layer of high, medium, and low risk without some sort of human involvement, some sort of context. And as you mentioned before, like stewardship and conversation that needs to happen even if teams are using Align AI just to learn together and kind of evolve their capability so they can practice it consistently, but also preach it to the other folks in the org who are submitting their ideas around what the process looks like. I hear a lot of the goal of like, we want to be the shepherd up the mountain to get the thing approved, not the gates and the perceived wall that the business sees and whenever they're trying to get an AI solution deployed.
Yeah. I mean, boy, I could take this in so many different directions.
Yeah.
But what I would love is to have you walk me through an intake and a governance process as Align AI envisions it. And I want to think about this. Can I give you a hypothetical like project to use to
Yeah, sure.
walk through it?
Yeah.
I want you to I would love to walk through this with a caregiver who is outside of IT or the digital domain. So we have a frontline caregiver, somebody who is engaged in direct patient care, who has on their own time and using enterprise approved resources. So they're not like running something in their garage, like they don't have DeepSeek on a server in their garage. They're using, like cybersecurity vetted tools, and they've come with an educational support tool. This is something that has like publicly accessible protocols, but it's a resource that somebody can ask, hey, I have a patient who just came in who looks like this and this. What do the protocols tell me I need to do next?
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Fascinating because obviously there are ethical considerations in the point of use in terms of describing a person. I mean, obviously a pro that they're following the enterprise protocols there, but this one's interesting because
Isn't
this
it?
is a bit of a patient facing, a bit of
Mm-hmm.
clinician facing, kind of on the ground operational use of AI in that space too. What we see, just to give some context here, for use cases like this, but also even a lot simpler ones, the overall time it may take to go from I have an idea for this solution to getting a thing approved and actually implemented historically has been 9 months to a year across the org. That's incredibly tough for somebody to actually keep up with innovation and the solutions that are getting deployed, let alone stay engaged with that process because of all of the operational hurdles internally to review, collect the information, understand the vendor, select all of that, build versus buy decisions, everything involved there. The aspect that I think is so critical to unpack here is an acute understanding around the point of use, the implications of the decisions, and ultimately, like, we talk a lot about human in the loop, but like, how much is that human still going to put their level of human decision making and really like context on top of whatever the output is? Like, there should be that, I think, starting there and really nailing the requirements is, I think, a lot of times where people miss the ball in terms of just submitting a thing and then kicking the idea around because of all the implications. There's so many ways that this could go wrong, but I think doing better requirements gathering up front and really what we push for in Align AI, which is like gather requirements up front, make it very, very specific to a point of use, and obviously set up guardrails for when that point of use may change and understand it. But with our goal of shortening that time, really help to get the requirements collected and then set out to the different teams to help with that evaluation. Yeah, it seems like you have a question.
I do have a question. So
Yeah.
when you're doing requirements gathering, it sounds like what you might be part of what you might be documenting that is a sort of an on-label use case, if I may.
Part of it is also making it a conversation. We at Align AI recognize that forms are the common way for folks to submit this, or an email or a meeting. We've set up a way to make it conversational. So you can converse with our Align AI configured chatbot to basically say, like, I have this idea for this. And it'll help you as the end user unpack the requirements, the point of use, the process, and like gather much more rich contextual information than a simple form that somebody may submit in the past.
So this is a great point because one of the things that I have frequently wished for out loud is some sort of assistance because right now I am either the first or the close to the first point of contact for many parts of our AI governance process. And the number of times where I have to sift through and go and look at a vendor website or maybe read through a pitch deck or something like that before discovering that there isn't the only AI in this product is in their marketing materials. It is not in the actual thing itself. Or discovering that the AI that's in it is industry standard and is not the novel that is not actually the novel thing that is being proposed. So it's lovely to hear that there might be some automation possible in early stages of the intake process, and also to capture the value that comes from having that sort of exploratory conversation.
Yes. Oftentimes, you can get so much more from just that exploratory conversation. Of course, not make it too burdensome, right? Still make it 5, 10 minutes, but to really unpack, there's so much you can get from how it's going to be used, how frequent the process happens, what are the implications of the decision, what is the output of the information you'd want to collect, how are we going to, like, you can really clear up a lot of the confusion and reduce a lot of the rabbit holes up front just by clarifying that and making it more conversational. Because although the clinician on the ground, they may be really up on the latest AI tech, there's so many things that they may not have considered, or they're not up on the latest legal or requirements from a governance standpoint around what to adhere to. Yeah.
So walk me through then, once we've gotten through our intake process, talk to me about governance that is kind of baked in to the system. What felt important to to include in your platform, and what feels important that we need to educate our human beings who are using the platform about?
It's both sides, and we call it governance by design. It's that let's not wait till the solution's all the way through the process at the end, where then governance considered, right? So as we're thinking through prioritizing, what is the governance implications? What is the mitigation planning we would have to do? You talked about education as well. We call them playbooks. Either way, there's so many humans that need to come in, whether they're requesting the idea or they need to review it or collect additional requirements as like an advocate on the ground, providing guidance via playbooks around how we at our organization think about high, medium, and low risk. Because to our point before, it can vary by organization. There's no like federal rules that everybody adheres to. So I think being upfront around like, we want to help shepherd you up the mountain. Here's what low risk use cases look like. Here for the higher risk use cases, here's how we think about building in designed monitoring, building in designed, ability to understand how it's being used at the end of the day and like re-reviewing that over time and doing the testing, gating it as maybe a proof of concept or a pilot to also prove out the feasibility of that too. The feasibility of the solution phase. So it's intaked, we gather better requirements up front, and then we get into actually, it's a prioritized thing that's valuable, great. Now we're getting into solution feasibility. There's also that key aspect of, gosh, the market is moving so quickly. There's so many new solutions that have come to market just in the past few months. What's available and secure? Or what might be something that's worth us building internally because maybe we have a data science capability. And like that build versus buy decision is still omnipresent around what path we should go down. And each of those have governance and security implications as well, along with timeline too.
So you mentioned something that I want to dive deeper on because you said if the solution is valuable. And so one of the things that has really been fascinating to me in my recent reading, so I was just reading the JAMA Network Open paper on the value of AI scribes in reducing self-reported burnout. And I think they did it at like 6 different health systems. The tool that they were using was a bridge, but I think that the technology is pretty well demonstrated. If the integration is strong, that it does in fact reduce the time that your clinicians are spending doing documentation. I want to talk about value, and I want to talk about what it means. Let me back up here a second, because kind of the implicit contract, right? When we look at software to help with intake and to do governance, is that we're speeding that timeline to ROI. So you said that projects can take 9 to 12 months to get up and get moving. The implication is that if we can condense that, then we can start realizing our value faster. Talk to me about how an organization might choose to define return on investment or value.
And it's important to the organization to define who ultimately owns that value as well, and the implications of that value in more financial organizations to impact P&L and literal revenue generation versus cost savings in that way. And we see a lot of teams setting up a lot like consistent risk ratings, consistent value and benefit categories for things as they're going through the process too, to better understand that. Obviously, the requester and the business unit that it impacts plays a role. Maybe it rolls up to operations when we're talking about actual time savings for, say, a call center or somebody in the OR. Or maybe it comes to this may lead to an increased patient care, or this may lead to more efficient customer experience for us at the end of the day. We talked about this ahead of the call. One thing I'm seeing that's particularly exciting is in years past, it was very much a use case by use case ROI kind of focus there. A lot of kind of stringent evaluation around how much is this going to worth? How much can you guarantee that? When's it going to hit? And it was, I think of it's very like penny wise, pound foolish around bogged down at the individual use case level. The more mature organizations tend to come up to more of the capability that we're building, either in-house with our data science team or with the vendor partnerships we're building, because the upside in terms of competitive advantage, in terms of customer experience, in terms of revenue growth, oftentimes far outweigh it. I'm not saying one is more important or replacing the other. The operational on the ground time saving is still absolutely relevant to help transform just the operations of how we work as a company and work on more valuable stuff with all of our employees. There's the other side though, which is how is this transforming how our customers engage with us? How is this transforming like how we think about operating as a company and doing those things that really differentiate and make us very unique as a healthcare provider at Cleveland Clinic versus somewhere else? There's still that personality, that culture that each company has that you should really consider when you're building capabilities and your strengths for AI solutions inside of your org too.
Yeah. I think the reputation and the need to accustom your workforce and your patient population to a like people are accustomed to a particular level of technology. They expect you to keep up with it. And also, the thing that I keep thinking about is, the maturity of artificial intelligence in general, right? Large language models came out, they completely changed the game, but where large language models excel, at the risk of sounding like a total pedantic butthead, large language models generate text. They're generative AI. And where large amounts of text are important, when you think about like your canonical sales funnel, right,
Yeah.
is top of funnel stuff. And
Yeah.
it's very difficult to measure ROI on top of funnel stuff.
Oh yeah.
And
Think
so I'm
think about like what Google Analytics did to marketing attribution, right?
right.
Like how can you account for people visiting the website to actual conversion? It's hard. It's
It
really hard.
is. It's very hard. It's very nuanced. And so I think both as the field matures, as health systems mature in our use of the technology, and as we start to get more strategic about what truly constitutes value.
Yeah.
I know we talked about this in our prep session, right? What if value is moral and not just monetary? Is there value, even if it never shows up on your general ledger, on reducing your provider's stress level?
Yeah. And at the same time, I heard a very important quote just in the past few months from a CDAO at one of the organizations we work with, which is how do you justify the cost of email, right? You spend money on email and Outlook. It's just part of your core operating principle. More companies are coming around to that with AI and Gen AI solutions too. It's inherent. And I think at times it can become very exhausting and it become a lot of effort and time spent just to trying to quantify the little operational gains that people are getting just by using AI naturally.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Nick, I could talk to you for ages, and I suspect this will not be the last time you come on the podcast because I already am thinking about questions for another time. I
Yeah.
can't tell you how much I appreciate A, your willingness to chat with me live on air, and B, just your willingness to chat with me in general. Your perspective is so refreshing, so well informed, and I'm truly grateful to have it represented.
Jenny, thank you so much for having me. I would love to come back for another episode. This was a ton of fun. And of course, let's keep changing it up. There's so many topics and things that are evolving over the years here too. So like we could always find something to talk about. Happy to come here and of course, like would love to have you on our podcast as well. So we can start to be neighbors.
Sign me up. Can't wait.